Hi everyone. I wanted to talk for a minute about inks. There are basically two different kinds of inks. Now there's gonna be exceptions to this, like hybrid inks and all kinds of things. But in general, there are dye-based inks and pigment inks. Dye-based are water-based. Pigment inks are made to dry slower, and they're basically embossing inks, meaning they are made with glycerin. In the old days, we used to make our own embossing inks by getting glycerin at the drugstore and combining it with all kinds of other stuff, and made our own brew, and it was a great embossing ink. Okay, so the glycerin makes the ink dry slower, which is why pigment inks are good for embossing, because they stay wet and they hold on to embossing powder. Dye-based inks evaporate quickly, not as quickly as alcohol, but quickly because they're made with water. So, if you have a ton, well, I have a ton of inks, but if you have a lot of dye-based inks and you want to make them embossing inks, it is possible, and get 2 for 1. Okay, how do you do that? Well, if you stamp, say you take this leaf stamp and I stamp it on this Adirondack pad, I can emboss with it, but the image is going to skip. You're going to get holes, which basically, whenever you're embossing, if you can, you want to use an ink that matches your embossing powder, so that if that should happen, or if some should flake off, like when you're mailing a card, the ink underneath will fill in that gap. But sometimes we don't do that, especially with clear. So, how do I do this? How do I make this dye-based pad a great embossing pad? There's a way to do it, and you only want to do it when you're using the stamp specifically. This isn't a, make a totally new pad. If you will stamp your stamp first with Versamark, and then stamp it on your dye-based pad, it doesn't hurt your dye-based pad, but you get superior coverage. And you stamp it, and it will, this piece has got glue on it, but it will hold the ink wet long enough to emboss it. So you get a really good image, and see how wet that is. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm going to show you some examples up close. Okay, now my other tip before I show you that is, if you use a lot of embossing powder and you put it in a Tupperware like I do, use a little piece of Velcro, put your spoon on the top, and no digging around in the powder and getting it all stuck under your nails. Okay, now let me show you this. Okay, this is embossed with just the Adirondack pad. That is to say, a dye-based, water-based pad. Okay? And what you're doing is you're not heat setting it, you are melting the embossing powder, which is made of very fine plastic particles. Okay? Now see how it's skipped over here and it's kind of rubbing off? Okay? That's because it doesn't have enough moisture. It doesn't have enough to hold that on. I mean, it would do in an emergency, but look how much better this one is. See how shiny it is? How complete the embossing is? That was done just like we talked about, by first stamping your stamp with Versamark, then right into the dye-based ink. Now, it doesn't come off on your dye-based ink. The Versamark sticks to your stamp, not to your dye-based pad. The dye-based ink covers the Versamark. And the Versamark extends the play time, if you will, of the dye ink, allowing you to get a great embossing. And I'm trying to tilt that so you can see it in the light. See it? Okay, so you can have 50 dye-based pads, 1 Versamark, and all of a sudden you've got 50 dye-based pads and 50 pads you can emboss with just by adding a Versamark. Hope that helps. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.